let's talk about what went right and what went wrong with this sewing pattern. Welcome to the Sewing Report. I'm Jen. This channel is all about sewing crafts and DIY projects. If you're new here, consider subscribing because I'm doing a series called Learn to Sew in 2020 for the true beginner. And I want to focus in on a sewing pattern that I completed recently. It is B6688, which is a women's blouse. I got this on sale a while ago and I thought it would be a fun project. I did view B, which has these really cute flouncy sleeves. I am in love with the sleeves alone, and I wanted to share my thoughts about the pattern, some general tips, and just stuff to look out for in the pattern instructions. First of all, let's talk about sizing. I cut out a 14. It's a little bit loose fitting, and I do have pretty small shoulders, so I find with a lot of top and dress patterns, the sleeve cap extends out past where my actual shoulder cap does. I'm usually too lazy to make a pattern adjustment, so it is what it is. This is pretty loose fitting. I probably could have cut a size 12, but I'm sort of liking how loose it is. I don't like feeling constricted in shirts, and I'm one of those people, I cannot stand like round neck, crew neck, or like turtlenecks. I feel claustrophobic wearing them, and I will only wear shirts right now with a V-neck. If it's like a tight choker type shirt, I'm out. I can't do it. So I like the style. It's got a very clever construction technique for the neckline, which I'll go into a little more later. You can see there is a split neck and there is a facing on the front of the neckline and a double yoke on the back. Overall, I like this pattern. I would recommend it. I think it's generally a pretty easy sew. As we get into this, I'll let you know what went wrong with this pattern, and it was pretty much all user error. So I certainly don't blame the pattern or the pattern instructions. I think they were pretty good overall. I would rate this pattern as being pretty beginner friendly. There was nothing in it that I found particularly challenging or really frustrating. I absolutely love the design of View B, which is what I made. The sleeves, again, super cute. This shirt is so wearable and you could really dress it up or down. I think it really fits into the current trend of like the loose, flowy shirts. You can do the thing where you tuck it in just at the front. I also made a sash out of the same fabric, so I could use that as a belt. So there's a lot of ways you can wear this top. You can dress it up, you can dress it down. And the fabric I used is one I've had for a very long time. This is cotton and steel rayon challis, which I think was a pretty good choice overall. You really want a fabric that's kind of lightweight and flowy. The example photo looks like it's made of some sort of polyester crepe, and it looks really pretty on the model, so I would certainly not recommend like a quilting cotton or anything heavy. Now, one thing to note is that sometimes sewing lightweight or slippery fabrics can be tricky, so I have a tip for you. With rayon or anything like maybe like a lightweight cotton poplin, something that's a natural fiber, I use Terial Magic. I soaked all my pattern pieces after I cut them out in the Terial Magic and then I pressed them. I have a whole other video just about Terial Magic, and I'm gonna throw in some footage here of me going through the process with this particular project, but that made the fabric really easy to work with. What Terial Magic does is it stiffens the fabric temporarily. So once I applied the Terial Magic and then pressed it, it made it just so much easier to work with and sew. I didn't get all the slippiness and going through the sewing machine. It was just a lot easier. I'm glad I did it. I know Terial Magic can be a little bit pricey, but if you're gonna be doing a project and you want to eliminate a lot of the headache, I would really recommend using that product on your fabric because it'll make your life just so much easier. Once I finished making the blouse, I gently hand washed it and then threw it in the dryer for a little bit just to get some of the wrinkles out, and then I additionally took my garment steamer, steamed it, and then I pressed areas like the hems. I find with rayon challis that it does tend to wrinkle a little bit, so just know that going in, that if you want to make it in that fabric after you wash it, you are going to need to do some pressing and steaming, and then it'll look like this. From the cutting to completion, this took me about 3 days. One night I just cut all the fabric out and marked all my pieces. Then another 2 days I actually did all the construction, the pressing, all that stuff. I'm super slow though, so I know you might be a lot faster than me, but I'm certainly not some sort of like expert seamstress. So I found this pattern pretty easy to follow. I didn't think there were any confusing parts of the instructions for the most part, but I will share the mistakes I made. For one, I should have used a slightly heavier stabilizer on the facing piece. There was a facing piece on the inside of this neckline, and that's how it has a clean finish on it. I used a pretty lightweight sheer interfacing. I should have used something slightly heavier just because I noticed that this neckline part tends to flop around a little too much for my liking. The second fail on my part also had to do with the facing. This was certainly the most difficult portion of the pattern, and I wouldn't even say it's that hard, but this was what kind of tripped me up. So I thought I would pass along the information so that hopefully you don't have to go through what I did. So once you apply the interfacing, and then I finished off the raw edges of the facing on the serger. That's how I like to finish off a lot of my seams. It's pretty easy and doesn't take a ton of time. So once you do that, then you're supposed to sew on 2 lines, the main piece and then the facing piece. Then you cut a slit down the middle and you're supposed to flip it right side out, press it, and then edge stitch it. You're supposed to cut just to the tip of the V that you're stitching. I feel like I cut it a little bit too close because when I went to hand wash the item and then threw it in the dryer, this was after I was all done, the stitching in the fabric kind of came loose and started fraying, so I ended up having to hand sew that part just to kind of try to fix it. When I did that, it really messed up how the facing lies and then how the fabric on the front of the V-neck gathers. And I'll show you a close-up here. It doesn't look extremely clean like it did originally before I laundered the item. And in hindsight, I know now that if I was to do it again, I wouldn't snip that part quite so close to the stitching. I also would have put some fray check on those edges of the fabric because when I threw it in the dryer, that's when things started to fall apart. So that was on me though, and not really on the pattern, but just so you know, if you're making that pattern, something to watch out for sure. If you want to go more in depth into the actual sewing process, I have a separate video that I'm gonna link here and I'm gonna link down below in the description box, really going more into the actual sewing pattern instructions and how to do a lot of common techniques. So if you want to see more of that, check out that video. And it doesn't even necessarily apply just to this pattern, but a lot of sewing patterns have the same types of techniques that calls for in the instructions. Something that I really appreciate about this pattern is kind of the ingenious way that the neckline comes together. I thought that was pretty cool, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So there is the facing piece on the neckline, and then there's the main front piece. Then there is a back yoke, and then there's an inside yoke piece. The top portion is actually 4 pieces, but overall I felt like the pattern pieces were pretty simple, not a ton of stuff to cut out. But what you do is you put the facing piece on the front first, and then you put on the back yoke piece, then you put the liner yoke piece on last. There is a little bit of hand stitching with this pattern. I didn't really mind that too much. It wasn't a lot of hand sewing, and I liked the way it left a clean finish. So the inside yoke piece looks very neat on the inside, and I thought that was pretty cool, but I liked the way it came together. I thought that was one of the coolest parts of this pattern. I'm freaking in love with the sleeves. I think the sleeves, this is one of the cutest sleeves I've ever sewn, and I love this shirt overall. I think the fabric choice I picked is pretty appropriate for the pattern, and it's very fun. You could wear this shirt pretty much all year round. I live in Florida, so I can see myself wearing this a lot. It is driving me a little bit crazy that I messed up the split neck in the facing, but what can you do? I think it still looks pretty darn good, and I would certainly make this pattern again. I didn't find it too difficult, and I think it was fun to make. So that is my review of B6688. If you've made this pattern, let me know below in the comments what'd you think, and if you have any helpful tips, share those as well. If you're looking for some other videos to watch here on this channel, I have a lot of beginner sewing videos, so check one of those out. I do have one on how to use a sewing machine if you are brand new here, so hopefully you can find this helpful. But I'm Jen with the Sewing Report. I'll see you guys again in the next video.